To get started with your chessboard, you've got to find some good contrasting light and dark woods for your opposing squares. We're using maple and black walnut. The black walnut that we're using is Peruvian black walnut because it's a little darker. But any good contrasting colors of wood make a great chessboard because you want that natural wood to be your opposing colors. Let's get started by going to the table saw, cutting them into strips. You got to glue them strips first. We're going to be making the squares of our chessboard 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. So the first thing we need to do is cut our lumber in 2.5-inch strips. Then we're going to do a little detail piece, a little accent cut that I like to do on my chessboards, gives it a little distinction. We'll show you what we're going to do after I get this cut into strips to make that happen. To give the little detail on our pieces that we want to do, what we've done is we have set our fence on our jointer at 45 degrees, and we're going to run our strips through just one pass against the fence and put a 45-degree chamfer down each side. Then as we glue our pieces together, it will give a little V-groove chamfer between our strips. Let's go ahead and get that done, glue it up, and show you. Okay, we're done at our table saw. You can see now as we put our pieces together, we've created a little kind of a V-groove channel between our pieces. There's a special trick, however, that I've got to explain to you. In a typical glue up, we would glue up and we would want squeeze out to show that we got enough glue in between our joints. In a little V-groove like this, the last thing we want is a big bead of glue at the bottom of our channel. We want that to be very clean, and I'm going to show you a little trick that was taught to me by a master furniture maker years ago. When you get ready to do a glue up like that, you put a small little kerf cut. Just this, now, let me show you here at the end. You can see our V-groove channel. We're on the flat spot. We've put a very small little kerf cut there. He called it a glue line. What we do is we glue here, and then as we put our piece together and clamp up, any excess glue goes into that glue line and doesn't come up in a squeeze out. If we have squeeze out in the bottom, that's not a big problem because we're going to clean the bottom up later. But we definitely don't want any squeeze out in our little channel there. So our little glue line helps us to keep the bottom of our V channel nice and clean, even though we use plenty of glue to glue it up. So let's go ahead and get ready to glue up and make sure that we got it right. A couple of other things. We're getting ready to glue up. You can see I have my clamps here. One of the things that you want to make sure when you glue up a chessboard, especially one with this V-groove feature that we have, make sure that your clamps are good and clean, that they're nice and even. You've got a flat surface to glue on, because the one thing you want to do is make sure that when you glue up, this is all really good and flat and tight, and you have even pressure. That's why I've used 3 clamps on such a real short little glue up. This is not a delicate glue up, but an important glue up to make sure that you get all the things right. Now, our little glue line that we put in only has to be on one side. So what I did is I put my glue line on both sides of my dark strips except for the outer one, and I didn't put a glue line on my maple strips. And so what we're going to do is glue both sides of our dark strips as we put them in, and then clamp it up. So this, like I say, just watch as we go through. This is a very important stage as you build your chessboard, especially with our little feature like we talked about. So let's get started. Put on our glasses so we can actually see what we're going to do and get going. Okay, we're getting ready to take our chessboard out of clamps now. We've loosened the clamps. One of the things that I wanted to point out was because of our little glue line, remember our glue line that we put on our boards, if you look at the bottom of our V groove that we have here, there's no squeeze out. We have a nice clean groove, which is what we want. But we do want squeeze out to show that we had plenty of glue. And if you look, there's squeeze out on every joint here. So we had good glue up, but we didn't have glue come through in our V groove. We've got to do this again now on the second part of our glue up for our chessboard. So first thing you got to do, go to the table saw, square up one end. Remember we want our squares to be 2.5, so we've got to take some 2.5-inch slices and glue up one more time. Let's go to the table saw. Before we can cut, we have to clean off all of our squeeze out, our dry glue, excuse me. And so we're going to take our glue scraper and scrape the bottom of our glue up really good and clean so that it goes through good and clean on the table saw. Okay, we have all of our pieces, our strips cut. In order to make opposing squares for our chessboard, we just turn every other one around and go like this. But the thing we have to do is go back and now put the same chamfer like we have right here to make our little V groove. We have to go down both sides of our cut now in order to have this feature go all around each square to give it an elevated look. Now we have a piece of cutoff here left over. We're going to take this to the jointer and make sure that we get our cut exactly the same on our jointer like we did when we did the 45-degree joint on the end of this little board to give us that feature. We're going to make sure that we match up by using our test piece, and then we'll go through and we'll put a chamfer down both sides. A chamfer is a 45-degree route or cut on the end of a board. That is called a chamfer. So when I refer to it as a chamfer, that's what I'm talking about. This is a chamfer cut, just a little 45-degree edge. So we're going to go through and set go over and set our jointer up for our chamfer and joint the edges of our individual strips and get ready for our glue up. You can see we now have our jointer set so that our bevel is perfect around each square. You can see that the angles line up so that we have a good tight crisp corner. This corner is going to be repeated around each of our squares as we put our joint along, or do our little cut along both sides of each strip, and then put it together. But let's go ahead and do all of the pieces on the joiner, and then we'll show you how that goes together. This is a good time to look, and you can see the little glue line on each of the dark pieces. We're going to be repeating that glue line as we get ready to glue up the other direction too, so that we make sure that we keep our glue out of the bottom of our little feature. Okay, let's go ahead and joint all the rest of them. Well, you can see it's starting to look like a chessboard. The next step, put our little glue line cut in there so we can glue together. Let's get that done and go to the bench. We're all done at the table saw and the jointer, putting our cuts that we need to do on it. We have done our chamfer edge, we've done our glue line edge, and we're ready to glue our chessboard together. This is a very critical point, however, when gluing your chessboard together. You've got to make sure that your sides line up perfectly as you're putting your glue on, because this is what makes everything line up perfectly square. So really be cautious, careful, pay attention when you're doing your glue up. I always have to really watch when I'm doing a chessboard to make sure that I get my edges perfectly square now, because this is the critical point. So let's go ahead and glue it up and proceed to that point. Okay, let's take our board out of clamps and see how we did on our glue up. We did great. Good squeeze out. Let's take it over to the wide belt sander. We're going to sand the back nice and smooth and the front and get everything all leveled up and get ready for the next step. Off to the wide belt. We just completed taking our chessboard through the wide belt sander and doing a little edge sanding. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that after your glue up. If you don't have a wide belt sander or access to a drum sander or wide belt sander, all of the sanding that I just showed you can be done by hand. You can use a little palm sander, sand the front and back. You can just take a block sander and sand your edges, get everything all cleaned up that way. It's just more work. I use the machinery because I have it. But we're that far along in our chessboard and ready to put a little skirt and some feet on it. Let's go there. We're getting ready to put our skirt portion around our chessboard. I milled some cherry, 3/4 inch thick cherry. I've made it 1 3/8 and I put a 1/2 inch deep by 5/16 wide, or I should say 1/2 inch wide, 5/16 deep, however you want to say it. Anyway, I put that chamfer on, or that rabbet cut, and we're going to 45 our corners all the way around and put this skirt on just like that. We'll be using some 1 1/4 18 gauge brads from the bottom to nail in, and then we'll be pinning our corners together with some 23 gauge headless pins, and we'll take it to that point. We're going to put a little bit of glue, but not much. We don't want our glue to squeeze out over the top of our edge banding, our little skirt here. So we're going to put our skirt on here, line it up with our miter on both ends. You can see we have a little bit of squeeze out along the bottom, and that's great. We're going to give it 18 gauge 1 1/4 nails very carefully. Let's make sure we didn't ruin our chessboard. Oh no, we did good. All right. The next piece goes together just like this. Same thing. A little glue in the corners. And we'll glue our end. We don't want too much glue. We don't want a lot of squeeze out on the face of our project. This is one thing that on this one, squeeze out is a bad thing. Typically it's not. And it comes together just like that. We're going to put a little 23 gauge pin in the corner to make sure it holds the corner together. Let's do that. Just one, don't need a lot. There we are. And that's what our skirt's going to look like. Let's go ahead and do it the rest of the way around, and then we're going to make some cute little feet. All right, we've completed our sanding. It's looking really good. If you noticed, I took a little block sand and I went between all my squares to clean up any of the little feathers so that we are nice and clean. We've sanded to 180. The skirt that we've put around, this is, remember, this is maple, Peruvian black walnut, and the skirt that we put around it is cherry. The little feet that we're going to put on are also cherry. And I'll show, let's get a little closer and I'll show you how we did the feet. We made the feet out of a piece of 4-inch colonial crown, and if you line up the bump, you can see that we cut right along this seam and cut off the bottom edge, and we took a little cut out of that. We put a sculpted end on both ends, and then we cut it and put it together in a 45. And our little feet are going to go together and fit on our chessboard just like that. Make such nice looking little feet. Now we're going to go ahead and get those all put on. They'll take a little sanding and puttying when we get all done. And then we're going to go to the paint shop and give it just a coat of clear lacquer to highlight those wood colors that we used. Anybody for a game of chess? We just got out of the paint shop giving this a coat of lacquer that made the colors of the wood pop. Makes it a beautiful color, and with that contrast between light and dark is so nice for a good chessboard. But this is a great little item to do and a great gift item if you want to do one. Appreciate you being with us as we went through the steps that it took to build a beautiful chessboard, and we'll look for you next time on Woodworking with Wes.